Let me give you a report on where we are. Obviously, we need to act. We finally got a completed bill from the House yesterday. We need to continue ensuring that frontline healthcare workers have all the resources they need. We need to directly help American workers and families face this uncertain period. In particular, we're examining policy tools to put money directly and quickly into the hands of American families. We also need to move swiftly and boldly in a major way to help America's small businesses survive this disruption and thrive on the other side of it. In particular, we are preparing bold steps to ensure that Main Street can access liquidity and credit during this extraordinary time. So let me outline for you what we've been doing. I've created three task forces among Senate Republicans, each of them tasked with coming up with what could best be described as the next bill. We're trying to reach an agreement among ourselves as to what Senate Republicans and the administration favor doing next. With regard to the bill that came over from the House, there was some discussion about whether to amend that with a bigger proposal, because we all know a bigger proposal is necessary. But I've decided we're going to go on and vote as soon as the Senate can get permission to vote on the bill that came over from the House, send it down to the President for signature, and thus reassure the people around the country that we can operate on a bicameral, bipartisan basis quickly. Second, we will not leave, the Senate will not leave until we have passed yet another bill. And clearly, that'll have to go in two steps. As I indicated earlier, first, Senate Republicans and the administration are going to try to reach an agreement on what we think is best for what could best be described as phase 3. Then, the Senate being the Senate, we will sit down with our Democratic counterparts and see what we can agree to. That we will not leave, the Senate will not leave town until we have processed yet another bill to address this emergency. With that, I'll be happy to take a few questions. Yes?
Yesterday, President Trump suggested that the social distancing may be required through the summer. Would that mean that this $1,000 that's being talked about as far as this third tranche of bills would go on until that? I mean, how long are you planning on giving people?
Well, all of that is things we're going to address in the next bill that we're beginning to write already. The details of that I can't tell you yet, but we know an additional bill of much larger proportions is necessary to meet this crisis. If we bend the healthcare curve, that will determine really how long this emergency lasts. And that has required extraordinary measures that basically have us in the unusual position of the American government, in effect, shutting down the American economy in order to meet these health concerns. If we can get on top of the health care concerns and bend the curve, we hope that this will be of limited duration.
Mitch McConnell?
Yeah.
Are you saying that in creating these three task forces, you're not yet willing to say you're on board with any single element of the administration proposal so far?
What I'm telling you is we're going to take up and pass the House bill as soon as the Senate gives us permission to do it. Then Senate Republicans, in conjunction with the administration, are going to write a next bill. The Senate being the Senate, we will then discuss with the Democrats what we can agree to pass, which will, of course, take 60 votes. The details of that obviously have not been determined yet. Yeah.
How the administration is talking about as much as $1 trillion. Is the scope, in terms of the overall scope, does that sound like a reasonable level to you at this time?
The details will be worked out in the way that I just outlined. And so I can't give you an answer particularly on a large question like that about what the overall cost of it would be. We haven't determined that yet. And obviously that final determination will be made in consultation with our Democratic colleagues here in the Senate. What I can tell you is we're not leaving town until we have constructed and passed another bill. Basically, phase 3 would be the best way to look at it. Yeah.
Mitch McConnell, are any Democrats going to be on these 3 task force? And also, at what point do Republicans become comfortable in spending $1 trillion at this point?
I just said the first step is for Republicans to largely agree on what we think is the best way to address this emergency. And second, we will consult with our Democratic colleagues and see what we can agree to. That's the way we'll go forward here in the Senate. And we'll stay here until we do reach a bipartisan agreement and achieve at least 60 votes to pass it.
Can you comment on that $1 trillion, the emotional?
Back in the back.
What's your approximation for when these checks will actually be in people's mailboxes? Were you given any sort of indication to what the White House is expecting there?
What's the indication of what? You talking about timing?
For cash payments to Americans, that's something that's been talked about a lot. Do you have any idea when that would actually be in people's hands?
Well, anything that requires legislation will not be able to move until we pass legislation. There are things they can do on their own. Is that what you're talking about?
I believe so. There are policy proposals for tax rebates, and I'm just questioning if you have any idea when those are going to.
They'll do whatever they're allowed to do administratively as quickly as they can. The rest of it will require our permission legislatively. The first thing we're going to do is take up and pass the bill that came over from the House. And the second phase I outlined a couple of times already, and that's the way we're going to go forward. Yes.
Mayor McConnell, can you address this idea that with the House bill, when it passes, there still is a lag time in repaying small businesses for the sick time for their employees? Can you address the concern about that lag time for small businesses? I know your Republicans have brought it up. And then once bill number 3, stimulus, gets through the Congress, as you expect, or working on, are you considering then recessing the Senate for a significant period of time?
A number of my members think there are considerable shortcomings in the House bill. My counsel to them is to gag and vote for it anyway, even if they think it has some shortcomings, and to address those shortcomings in the bill that we're in the process of crafting. I cannot predict how long we will be here, but we'll be here as long as it takes to pass yet another measure beyond the one that came over from the House.
And after that, do you think the Senate will return?
I can't answer that. Yeah.
Leader, we've been told that a number of Republicans and I guess on the Rules Committee are working on potentially voting from home.
No, we'll not. Yeah, we'll not be doing that. Look, there are a number of different ways to avoid getting too many people together. Just to give you a hypothetical, it's not set in stone that a roll call vote goes on only for 15 minutes. We could lengthen the amount of the roll call vote. People could come over one at a time, come over in small groups. We will deal with the social distancing issue without fundamentally changing the Senate rules. Yeah.
People are still going to the supermarkets and seeing all this, so much uncertainty. What do you want to tell them?
Well, the way to indicate certainty is to get about doing what we're talking about, to see bipartisan, bicameral action. And that will happen on the House-passed bill as soon as we can clear whatever procedural issues we have to clear to get it across the Senate floor and get it down to the President for signature. And then we're gonna move here in warp speed for the Senate, which almost never does anything quickly. I think everyone on both sides of the aisle is seized with the urgency of moving on yet another bill, and we intend to do that.
Senator McConnell.
Yeah.
Senator Paul is saying he wants an amendment vote as part of the second House bill in order to let you move quickly. Will you give him an amendment vote?
He generally, well, you have to ask him, but usually he wants to offer an amendment to pay for these kind of bills. He's usually willing to let us have that vote and move on. I hope that'll be the case this time.
Senator McConnell, eventually you're going to have to make a deal with Senator Schumer and with the Speaker, so just sort of wondering why not do that first.
I think the best way to proceed is the way I outlined, then we'll have a clear indication of where most of the Republicans are, and we'll sit down and talk to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and reach an agreement.
But is there an importance to send, a message about national unity?
Sure, and that'll be underscored by the overwhelming bipartisan vote of the House passed bill, and by ultimately an overwhelming bipartisan support for yet another bill which will originate in the Senate. Yeah.
McConnell, there's been discussions over the last year about the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. There needs to be corrections made to it to help retailers and small businesses, change the operating loss rules. Will those things come up during the course of this discussion? And might that make the same arguments come up over again about how bad the tax cuts were?
Look, the goal here is to deal with this emergency created by this pandemic. And anything that doesn't address that pandemic, it seems to me, should not be considered. We're working on trying to deal with this public health crisis, which we are trying to bend the curve on quickly. And anything that addresses plugging that gap for small businesses and for individuals, hopefully on a short-term basis, because if the advice Dr. Fauci and others are giving us is followed, we hope we're going to begin to bend the curve and get back to normal, because the underlying economy before all this came along was in very good shape. Yeah.
Back to my second question. Can you talk about the moment that Republicans became okay with spending perhaps up to $1 trillion? Is it the stock market? Is it the health risk? Like, what shifted among the party over the past couple of weeks?
Well, I mean, I've been through a few of these. I was here at 9/11. I was here during the financial crisis in 08. I was here during the fiscal cliff. We occasionally have these great crises, and when they occur, we're able to rise above our normal partisanship and many times our normal positions, because these are not ordinary times. This is not an ordinary situation, and so it requires extraordinary measures. Yeah.
Is there a role for Congress to play in helping these states that worry they don't have enough ICU beds, enough ventilators, as this spread becomes much worse?
All of that deals with the substance of measures that we are either about to pass or will pass soon, the contents of which, are being negotiated.
I mean, have you been satisfied with what states are getting from the federal government?
We're not satisfied with where we are, or we wouldn't be immediately turning to yet another bill. And we will be doing that shortly. I'm going to take one more because I think we're getting a little repetitive here. Yeah.
You mentioned you had established 3 task forces. Can you just say what senators you put on to lead those task forces?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I've said, you can't have 53 people write the bill, right? So what I've done is pick out groups of people to deal with 3 separate categories, and then I've told everyone else that if they have a really good idea, I've told them how to funnel that idea into that particular task force. Because this is a Herculean task from a legislative point of view to try to craft something this significant with 53 people. It just, can't be done. So everyone has a way to funnel in their particular suggestions to one of these 3 task forces. These task forces will be working with the Treasury Department and Secretary Mnuchin and his team to see if we can reach a Republican consensus so we know where we are. My understanding is Senator Schumer has laid out, to get back to your question, where they are. I'm in the process of crafting where we are, and then that's the logical time to sit down and make a deal. And that's what we intend to do, and we're going to do it before we leave here.
What are the 3 topics? How do you divide them? What are the 3 task force?
In a sensible way. It doesn't make any, honestly, it's not particularly newsworthy. Yeah.
Is there people you can tell us, is there a point person for these 3 task forces, Senator whomever, or if you can help get our heads around clarify for us?
I think you're getting down too far into the weeds. Our goal today will be to try to move forward and take up and pass as soon as we can the bill that's come over from the House, and then you'll be hearing from us as we move along, crafting the measure that Republicans will largely be behind, and then we'll sit down with Senator Schumer. Thanks a lot.